Hi, we are the Rabies group. We are going to go ahead and do our presentation for you. My name is Krista.
My name is Daniel.
And I'm Derek Rydalch.
And my name is Shanti. So in looking over rabies and studying it, we found a few things that we thought we should share with everybody. They're just a few fun facts. One is that Joseph Lennox Alwyn was the one who discovered that rabies could be passed from animals to humans, and that was discovered in 1932 with an incident of a bat bite. And the second one is that rabies is named after a Latin word, which means to rage, and this is because the animals that are infected, or even the people that are infected, are a lot more aggressive at raging them. And then the third one is that 95% of deaths, 95% of deaths of rabies actually come from Africa and Asia. Next slide.
I'll be covering the etiology of rabies. The rabies virus belongs to the Lyssavirus genus. As the name suggests, these viruses are rod-shaped. They have one end that is rounded and are often referred to as a bullet shape. Each virus particle is about 100 nanometers in diameter and 400 nanometers long, but the size is variable. In terms of virus genomes, this is a negative sense virus, meaning that it is a single-stranded nucleic acid molecule that has opposite sequence to messenger RNA or mRNA, so it cannot be translated into protein until it has been copied. This is important biological implications for the virus with negative sense RNA genomes, since the cells have no biochemical mechanism to copy RNA. Every negative sense RNA virus must carry within the virus particle an RNA-dependent RNA polymerase, or replicase, as it is frequently called, or the virus genome will be biologically meaningless once in the host cell. This virus is also enveloped. This lipid and protein structure, called the envelope, is derived from the host cell membrane. The envelope plays many roles in viral infection, including virus attachment to cells, entry into cells, release of the capsid contents into the cells, and packaging of newly formed viral particles. The capsid and envelope are also responsible for transfer of viral genetic material from one cell to another. These structures also determine the stability characteristics of the virus particles, such as resistance to chemical or physical inactivation. Next slide. Next, we'll be covering the reservoir for rabies. As you can see from the map, over the last 100 years, the epidemiology of rabies in the United States has changed dramatically. More than 90% of all animal cases reported annually to the CDC now occur in wildlife, whereas before 1960, the majority were in domestic animals. Rabies hosts in the United States today are wild carnivores and bats. Raccoons are most frequently reported rabid wildlife species in the United States, accounting for 36% of all animal cases, followed by skunks at 24%, bats 23%, foxes 7%, and other wild animals, including mice, rats, and rabbits accounting for 2%. The great reduction in human cases is largely the result of vaccinating dogs against rabies. Millions of dogs are vaccinated each year in the United States at a cost of over $300 million per year. Next slide.
So signs and symptoms. Signs and symptoms don't necessarily show up right away. Incubation period, though, is 1 to 2 months, which is the elastic more. But depending on the location of the wound, will kind of a lot when signs and symptoms occur. So, for example, if the wound is closer to the brain or near the neck, then the signs and symptoms will show up a lot faster than if they were further away from the neck or the brain. Next slide. So here are a list of signs and symptoms, and they're separated into signs and then symptoms. So Signs are delirium, fever, excessive salivation, conscious paralysis, and vomiting. The symptoms are headache, confusion, weakness, nausea, and insomnia. And just a reminder of the signs are what not only the patient or the person feels, but what somebody else can see of them. I mean, the symptoms are something only the person is able to. So this disease is a street disease, and it can lead to death if it's not quickly treated after infection. Next slide.
So for the transmission, according to the CDC, all species of mammals are susceptible to the rabies virus, but only a few specific species are important as reservoirs for the disease, like that was discussed before. The United States has distinct strains of the rabies virus that has been identified in the raccoons and skunks and foxes and coyotes here, and even several species of bats. So here is a picture that I found that kind of lays out some specific examples about the transmission of rabies. So almost all transmission is by bite, 50 times greater risk than a scratch. One human case may have been acquired in a laboratory transmitted by aerosol. In the wild animals, rabies can be transmitted translucently. Transplants in for humans is also possible to transmit rabies. So human to human transmission has never really officially been confirmed, or at least they don't have any documents on it. And that the rabies virus is never isolated from the blood. So how it begins is the transmission of the rabies virus usually begins when the infected saliva of the host is passed to an uninfected animal. One of the most common modes of rabies virus transmission is through the bite and the virus containing the saliva of the infected host. Although there are types of transmission that have been more hard to document, such as the contamination of the mucous membranes, so the eyes, the nose, the mouth, and then aerosol transmission, and the corneal and organ transplants that was kind of discussed before is possible to transfer from human to human. This is an example I found of raccoon exposure. So it kind of lays out, the process of the rabies virus. So it starts with the raccoon is bitten by a rabid animal. The rabies virus enters the raccoon through infected saliva. Rabies virus spreads through the nerves to the spinal cord and brain. Then the virus incubates in the raccoon's body for approximately 3 to 12 weeks, so 1 to 2 months. Then the raccoon has no signs of the illness during this time. Then once it reaches the brain, the virus then multiplies rapidly, passes through the salivary glands, and the raccoon begins to show the signs of the rabies virus. And once the infected animal kind of starts to show the signs, the animal will die usually within 7 days of it being infected. Here is a kind of poster that I found that kind of shows different sections. So the virus transmission, so it's usually saliva. 99% of human cases are caused by dog bites. It is fatal once it hits the brain. Then it kind of goes through the treatment that if you are bit or from an infected animal to seek medical help and to make sure the wound is washed. And the fatalities, it's usually in poor rural countries that this happens, is Asia and Africa. And usually there is one death about every 15 minutes, and 40% of the victims are children younger than 15.
In the summer of 1885, Louis Pasteur and 2 colleagues successfully developed a vaccine and treated a 9-year-old boy named Joseph Meister, who had been bitten by a rabid dog. With Pasteur successfully creating a vaccine for humans, other researchers and scientists took a different angle in fighting the rabies virus by vaccinating dogs. In 1979, the Van Heuling Research Laboratory in the Silliman University Medical Center in the Philippines produced a vaccine for dogs that grants them immunity from rabies for 3 years. This program has also been used as a model to fight rabies for other countries with the help of the World Health Organization. Today, there are several types of vaccines administered to the public for the rabies virus. The human diploid cell rabies vaccine, also known as HDCV, was brought up in 1967. It is an inactivated vaccine that has been given to well over 1 million people as of 2006. There have been other vaccines developed that are less expensive and newer than others, such as the purified varicella rabies vaccine, also known as PCECV. This particular vaccine uses the attenuated Worcester strain of the rabies virus and uses the varicella line as its host. To help vaccinate the wildlife, the vaccine has been injected into foods that other animals such as raccoons, foxes, and coyotes would eat. The injected food is then dropped into areas by airplane. This does not mean every wild animal has been vaccinated. Anyone who is bitten by a wild animal should still use extreme caution. When one is bitten by a rabid animal, the wound itself should be cleaned immediately and taken to a doctor. The doctor will then determine what steps to ensure any possible infection is properly cared for. It is recommended that someone who has never been vaccinated for rabies and is exposed to it should get 4 doses of a rabies vaccine, the first one immediately and the rest throughout the next 2 weeks. A shot called rabies immune globulin is also recommended to be given to the patient at the same time as the first dose. A person who has been previously vaccinated should get 2 doses of rabies vaccine, one immediately and the other 2 days later. The rabies immune globulin will be needed at that point. Next slide. For prevention, there is no law requiring people to become vaccinated for rabies, but it is highly recommended for anyone who is at a higher risk of exposure or constantly working around animals such as veterinarians, canine handlers, zookeepers, and microbiologists. Pets, such as dogs and cats, are now required by law to receive the rabies vaccine between 12 to 24 months of age, and again every 1 to 3 years. This protects not only their owners, but others that they may come in contact with as well. If they are bitten by possibly rabid wild animals, the rabies vaccine will protect them as well. Next slide.
Now that you've heard a little bit about rabies, we'd like to share a case study. The patient, a 57-year-old man who had lived in France for 15 years, had recently returned from a 6-month stay in Mali, West Africa. He presented with a fever close to 101 degrees, with abundant sweating, generalized pain, and a slow heartbeat of 40 beats per minute. The case report characterized brain images studies as unremarkable. The patient tested negative for herpes simplex 1 and 2, HIV, syphilis, and epilepsy, among other conditions. However, 2 days after ICU admission, the patient developed bouts of hyperactivity, disorientation, delirium, with thoughts of impending death associated with percussion ideas, alternating with periods of drowsiness and returns to normal behavior when he seemed aware of his disorder and criticized it, the investigator reports. Hypersalivation was remarkable, and the patient occasionally spat on ICU personnel. Salivary swabs obtained on day 13 in the ICU confirmed the rabies diagnosis. The strain, which was identified by the National Reference Center for Rabies, Paris, was known to be circulating among dogs in West Africa. There's cases complexity and large number of tests undergone left 158 healthcare professionals potentially exposed to the disease via the patient's bodily fluids. Following evaluations of these personnel, 52 were deemed at risk and were vaccinated against rabies. 2 of them who had been in close contacts with salivary fluids also received rabies immunoglobulin. Next slide. And these are just a few of the references if you care to research further or learn more about the rabies virus, but we hope you enjoyed our presentation.